Hi, this is LeAura Alderson here with Best Boomers and Beyond, visiting today with a business associate and friend, Kathie Nelson, out in Oregon. And Kathie Nelson, you can find her at kathienelson.com. And she's a business strategist, and she really focuses on helping small businesses grow their business and find their way. So welcome.
Thank you, LeAura.
And one of the things so Kathie and I are around the same age group. And since we are bestboomersandbeyond.com, we do not mince words when it comes to sharing our age. So are you okay with sharing your age?
I'm okay with sharing my age. I am 53 this year, which is a great year.
Awesome. Well, and why do you say it's a great year?
Well, it's a great year. Well, I got acquainted with some numerology, which 5 is the number of grace, and 3 is the number of unity, and 8 is the number of new beginnings. So 5 and 3 is 8. So I just kind of went, wow, what a great way to kickstart the year this year.
No kidding. And is that how it's felt for you?
It has. And every month, you know, I'll be turning again in March. So every month it's kind of better.
Okay. Well, so Kathie has a number of enterprises going on, and you and I have known each other since about 2010, and we both have been on an evolutionary journey, relative to the entrepreneur journey, which I think what people who may not be as familiar with entrepreneurs may not be aware, and that is that what we start today may or may not be what we're doing 5 years from now or even 2 years from now. And part of that is it isn't just that we're flighty, though there is the flightiness amongst us, but it is that we're idea people and creative. And we also see that, we begin a journey based on a vision that we have. And we recognize as we go on that journey that there may be many other open doors of opportunity, as I like to call them. And we often, take a peek and see if that is the next better thing to expand our growth. So really it's about not getting locked in to any particular mindset. And I know you work with entrepreneurs along the way, and we'll get to that. But could we start back first with how your career journey began?
Oh boy, in a nutshell, I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. So I got married because I knew I did want to do that. I wanted to get married. I want to have children. I love children. And so I got married at 20, and I had my first child at 21. And then at 22 was faced with that my husband didn't want to be married anymore. That was just a little more than he could bite off at that time. And so my son and I went our own way, and I'd made a decision that I was going to never be dependent on anyone again. So that really kind of took all my work. I'd been working for someone else, but it brought my work into a new view in terms of a career path and what was my career path going to be. So I got a job in computers and computer support and office support. Did that for a while, and then ended up being in telecom and being in the telephone industry, supporting training, sales, customer service. But I was in an auto accident right away.
Sorry, Kathie, let me just go back just for a second to the training that you were talking about, because you were entering that industry in an era where so much of it was on the job training, wasn't it?
It was.
Okay, so
then you guys. And actually, the positions I was in was relegated primarily to women. I mean, women, especially young women, they did the support roles, they did the customer service, they did the so it's very much a kind of, this is kind of what you do. And my early jobs before I got married, I'd been in banking, and I'd gotten my background in bookkeeping. So I had some finance background as well at that time, and could bring all of that forward. But as I came into the telecom industry, I actually moved to a town far away from where I grew up with my son and I, and kind of was the independent single mom, with all of that entails. But in my first couple months on that job, I was in an auto accident. And that's, you'd mentioned that in the pre-call, I was in an auto accident that actually kind of took me out of everything for quite a while.
And how old were you then?
I was 23.
Wow.
Yeah. So so I had this auto accident, which was, it was nearly fatal. I had a head injury and crushed everything from my ribs down. I don't need to get too graphic, but they were very sure I wouldn't walk again. And so that impacted me from there forward in many, many ways, of course.
Yeah, no kidding. So, I mean, at 23, and so you probably had to move back home and be cared for by family.
I did. I was in the hospital for quite a while. My son turned 2 the first month I was in the hospital. And I was in the hospital for a couple months, and I moved back and forth because I had multiple surgeries. So I moved back home, and it's
Wow.
like you slip into an alternate reality for a while. You know, anyone who's had a major medical event knows that you kind of slip out of the timeline into this other world.
Right. So then, so how long were you in that recovery period before you got going? And then what was that?
Well, because I was so determined to prove, because, when my husband decided he was going to leave me, I was determined I was going to take care of myself. And then when they told me I'd never walk again, I refused to believe that, which
Good,
is,
good.
people said, you're so naive, you're going to have to face the reality. I'm like, no, you don't get it. I'm
Yeah.
going to do everything I can. Well, so I was anxious to prove I could do what I could do. So I went back to work in 1 year on crutches and a leg brace.
Wow.
It was crazy. And I look back and I go, I should have just taken the time. But, at 23 years old, you're kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So I went back to work. I actually moved back to Eugene. I moved back far away from my family, took my son, and took care of myself. So I went back to work and it was hard. I was kind of in a work recovery. They did actually put me in. I was able to go back to school as well.
Nice.
And I was working on my business administration degree. But I've always had a job. I've never had to look for work. And so, needless to say, I was in telecom for a while. But the next jump was just that I ended up meeting my new husband, who I'm still married to today, and ended up moving to Portland. So I moved up the freeway. But
So you were mid-20s by now?
25 when I got married.
Okay, excellent. So, and it's interesting, you were 23 and now you're 53. So basically, it's a 30-year anniversary.
Yeah, it is. You're right. Exactly. Yeah, 3 decades completion of that.
Yeah, definitely. So then so you're back at work and you were doing telecom, and then so that basically that's corporate work, right? You're working for another company. So how long did you do that?
Well, I transitioned to another telecom company in Eugene, then I moved to Portland and I worked for another telecom company, but then I started my first company at 29.
Okay.
So I had the opportunity, because of the length of time and experience and the variety of roles in the company that I served, as well as I kind of always had an idea that I wanted to be in business, but nobody in my family came from a business background.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was a retired military school teacher and my mom was a stay-at-home mom.
Okay.
So, it's kind of like, well, I don't know how that would work. I don't know what that looks like.
Yeah.
But I had a chance to be in partnership with a company out of Seattle to open up a telecom distributorship. And I thought, ooh, this could be fun. And, my dad always told me I could do anything I put my mind to. And I thought, I could do that. So I took it on. And I ran the office, I ran the business, I ran the sales team, the tech team, I did all the parts. But there were some things I ran into that I didn't know how to deal with, and I didn't have the support as a small business owner and as a young woman in business, which
what
I
was the
think
example?
having that support system around you from either women mentors or a support network in general in terms of business is just, you cannot live without it. So I ended up leaving that at 2 years.
Would you be comfortable sharing some of the challenges that you experienced?
The challenges had to be with communication, had to be with dealing with partners, had to be with legal ramifications of different factors that you run into when you're a minor partner and you're a female.
Okay.
And it's interesting. And I know this will be broadcast, and so this is not necessarily private information, but it's interesting how when I spoke to the mentors that I had at the time, which I thought at my age, I respected them as business people, and I would talk to them about some of the challenges I had, they wouldn't give me solid feedback and information because they just couldn't believe I was doing what I was doing. Yeah. And I was
Well,
like,
wait,
at the time I thought, well, then I must be doing okay, or this must be a good decision, or this must be well thought through. But in retrospect, I look back and they actually were like, we can't even believe you're doing this. So whatever you think is right is fine.
so, well, it sounds like they were out of their element, that they didn't,
And I had no idea because I didn't have the experience to
right,
know whether they were in or out.
right.
But it was interesting to look back, and because sometimes you want to point fingers and you want to blame somebody and you want to go doggone it,
Yeah.
but in the end you have to take personal responsibility. I was 29, 30, 31. I believed, and I believed to the point of arrogance where I didn't necessarily ask for the help that I needed when I needed it, and I kind of settled for the first help that came rather than vetting it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and there are so many good points in what you're talking about. One of the first things that comes to mind is that so often people tend to assume that someone else has the answer for them
That's right. That's
and
right.
that the experts know
Mm-hmm.
what
That's right.
you need to do.
Mm-hmm.
But in that circumstance, that situation, you proved that basically you were already ahead of the experts available to you, and that you were pretty much doing pretty well. I'm sure that I'm sure that things, like you said, in retrospect, you would do things very differently. But under the circumstances, we're doing well. And as entrepreneurs, we do know that we learn a lot in the
Yeah.
doing, and
Mm-hmm.
and we also waste a lot of time in the
Yeah.
doing. And that's where coaches come in that have been there before and that do understand a bigger picture to help
Mm-hmm.
you do that with business, so that because that is one thing that's sort of like the a pain spot for entrepreneurs. Is the last thing you want to do is waste time.
That's right. That's right. But we end up wasting a lot of it in the search.
Yeah, exactly. So then, okay, so how long did that go on? Did you stay in that partnership and
Well, by 2 years, it was I elected to walk away with no money, no, left my investment, left everything, and just because I was so when I was embarrassed, I was ashamed, and looking back, those are kind of I failed, this
yeah,
didn't work, you always want to stand by your commitments when you say you're going to do something, and here is a pretty much, I guess I can't do what I thought I could do, and so it was really a personal kind of crisis moment. And so I kind of tucked my head and just walked away, and just I figured I would never be in business again. That just proved I was not cut out for this.
right. And that's where so many, and you see that, I know you see that in your work, and we'll get to that more, but that's where it's sort of like, okay, investments. There's so many people, and we were amongst them at one point, my husband and I, that if you lose money, say, I'll never invest again. Start a business. Oh, that doesn't, or even, a relative who says, oh, you don't want to start your own business. I know so-and-so started theirs and they lost everything they had. And what we now know as entrepreneurs and business people, and that is that, what, failure is just part of the game.
It is.
Toward better. And again, if you can have people guide you in that process so you waste less time, then that's awesome. But in the meantime, don't give up, because just learn from it, right?
That's right. That's right. Well, it's interesting that some of the people I met and that I did develop close relationships during that time, I still connect with. That there are valuable connections and nuggets that you can collect along the way, like you said. And actually, when you go back a couple years ago, I went back and talked to my boss right after that, because I went to work for somebody else, and in medical equipment, I just made a jump to something different. And
Kathie, can you hear me? You locked up for a second. Hang on.
Okay.
You locked up after you took the leap to medical equipment, and you went back and talked to your boss, and we lost you.
And I asked him what it was he remembered about me from that, because I worked with them for about 3 years. And, what was it stood out? What it was that thing that just kind of was that, what were the characteristics? And he said, Kathie, I could always count on you to figure things out. Because their accounting was in a mess there. And I went to work in sales for them. And I ended up unraveling their inventory and their, because of that problem solving ability to kind of dissect, once your brain starts working that way. And, can't remember, he said something else about that, but it it actually reinforced that my strategic thinking has been showing up my whole life.
Yeah.
Which I, kind of the Strengths Finder from Gallup Strengths Finder actually helped nail down and articulate that. But I was like, oh, so it just affirms when people knew you back then, and they say, well, I saw that characteristic, and
yeah, well, when also just the fact of that you weren't going to settle for, the accident. You weren't going to take that. You weren't going to be dependent. You weren't going to. All of that is about figuring things out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And I did that for 3 years, and then I had the opportunity to kind of come in the back door to another company that actually was part of a franchise type organization. So it already had a brand, it already had an umbrella, and I didn't have any pressure to pursue it, but I could if I wanted. And it challenged me for personal development to say, if I set some goals, what would happen? Because I had quit setting goals because when I did it before, I never met them. Mm-hmm. And I used to say, why would anybody set goals for themselves? Because all they do is make you feel worse about yourself in the end. Mm-hmm. And that's, when you've not been really trained or coached in goal setting and setting realistic goals and really breaking down the action steps, of course, you're going to end up with something to beat yourself up with. So that period, and actually I ended up staying with that company for 10 years, really gave me that opportunity to keep pressing the envelope of what I could do and what I could achieve, and kind of overcome some of those wounds that I'd gotten, from my accident, from the different jobs and the different my first company loss, which was pretty brutal. But the thing is that because of my handicap, because my legs were crushed, so I actually have a physical disability. Sometimes I can't do things other people can do, or it causes me great pain when I do. I had to work through those limitations in my mind about my picture of how I saw myself, and what I had to prove, what I thought I had to prove to show people that I wasn't that. Isn't that crazy, that little
Yeah, well, no, I mean, but I think that that's a relevant and poignant kind of thing, because mindset is really, that's what can make us or break us. And it seems like what you were saying is, look, my mindset is different than this external image. Mm-hmm. And I make sure that I assert that the vision of who I am in the world in a mm-hmm. way that not only everyone else sees it, but that I believe it too, that it's still there.
Well, and it's interesting because the reference I made was actually sabotaging me, because I had a false belief about, I thought that because of my disability, that even though somehow I could function at the same level as everybody else, I had to function more to prove that I was normal. I had a normal, what's normal. But when I realized that I was actually letting that define me, I had let that define me. It was almost like I had to wear it as a banner. And we know people like that. And, and one of the things I know now is that having grace for people who are in that space, who have to lead with that so that that about them.
Right.
It's still defining them.
Yes.
And when I realized I had the opportunity to speak for a women's group over a series of a year, and I had to tell that story over and over again. And what I realized is how much I owned it and how much I didn't want to own it anymore. And so to move to let it refine me instead of define me.
Excellent. That's really excellent, because at Best Boomers and Beyond, one of our mottos is basically defining, creating, and inventing our best possible life.
That's right.
We are the ones that we're the originators, and we're the ones that create the definition and decide, and it is more about refining. The moment we define something, we also limit it.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
To not being more than that.
Right. That's right. Yeah, and to see the catalyst, and you and I were chatting a little bit before as well, and I don't tolerate whiners well, and I'm better about it now than I was for many years, just because I've had to overcome hard stuff since it was hard for me to walk. I mean, and it's only been in this last year since I've been on eating a healthier diet and cleaner foods, that even my joints and they hurt less, and I can do more now than I've done in a long time. But that idea of, when you have limitations, but you have a goal that you are so committed and compelled for that you just find a way to work around it, there's really not an excuse making, whining.
Well, no, but I mean, I think that that's a really good point from as far as not tolerating whining, because there is far too much of that. And it's hard, in particular, being female, having sort of that hard nose kind of approach to things, and as a coach, there are people who are not used to that or comfortable with that. But what survivors, those of us who are survivors that have worked through challenging circumstances, recognize is that, crap happens and it sucks, but it doesn't help to moan and groan about it. That's not going to make us better, and it's not going to make their life, whoever's life, better. So, really it is about saying, okay, you know what, that stinks, and it's not going to define me.
It's right. Well, and even just giving yourself permission, if you need to have a pity party, have it for a little while. Yeah. But there's almost always ways to work around.
Yeah.
And by thinking through the obstacles, you can actually almost always work around them. And it comes down to what's your desire. If you don't want anything bad enough, you really aren't going to work through the obstacles.
Right. Yeah. And it's like you said, for a while. So have your pity party, but then let it have a timeline. Don't let it go on and on.
Yeah. I certainly understand and try not to be too hard-nosed, because I get it. Yeah. I get it when things are hard. Yeah. But I also know that there is a I think you said something like this, but it begins to erode. The longer we stay in that space, it erodes, and it continues to, it's almost like salt in the wound. It just makes the wound continue to fester, and then we can't really get clear or healed of it until we address it and clean it out and expose it to the light and say, I'm feeling sorry for myself, I'm frustrated, and you get a fresh point of view and move on.
Right. One of the analogies I use sometimes is it's like going outside and stepping in dog poo, and saying, it's like you don't stand there and bemoan about it and look at it and point to your shoe and, walk around it and turn circles and, you get exactly, okay, it stinks, I'm going to get rid of it, and then you move on, right? So you don't stand there just staring at it and talking about the crap that happens. It's there. You just move on.
That's right. Well, it's interesting how that 10-year period actually was almost 12 by the time I was all done. But
now you're around 42?
Yes, I am. It was about 40 when I launched my consulting practice that I am in now. But the growth journey that I was on in that company, because it was a sales, business development, and training, I was launching micro businesses over and over and over again. And they gave awards and incentives to continue the forward motion in their company. And it gave me, it helped feed my need to affirm that I wasn't broken, or from my divorce, from my lost company, from just, your life of every time I would win or earn something, it wasn't because of the prize at all. It was for somebody to say, you did it. You did it. That personal affirmation. And when I realized at the end, one of the last awards I won was I doubled my sales. And what did I do? I doubled my sales in 1 year, and doubled my, there was a sales and recruiting goal, and I doubled both in 1 year. And I was only one out of 22 people who accomplished it. Mm. And, in the time you have your head down, and you think about this for small business owners, because I can look back in the training that I got out of that, but as small business owners, we have our head down, we're not, you're on a track, and if anything, you're looking up to see that other people are doing it, and it feels like they're doing better than you, or, you're doing the comparison. But in the end, when you stop and look up and you realize how few people have actually followed through to cross the finish line, and that you actually, because I was feeling like, even though I had earned it, I didn't feel like I'd earned it.
Why is that, do you think?
Well, because I'd had my head down, and I wasn't looking around. And it wasn't until I was really on the stage receiving this award and kind of seeing that there was only a couple of us up there, and realizing, wow, okay. Yeah. But it was almost like it was the last thing that said, there's another place that you need to go to get that healed.
Yes. Yeah, well, and I think that, part of what you're describing too is the concept of, um, like in fitness, for instance, if we're working with a personal trainer, then they push us usually harder than we tend to push ourselves, unless maybe we're in an exercise class. And we're in an exercise class, then we tend to try to kind of judge how we're doing by what the other person's doing.
Exactly.
But when you're kind of working on your own, really it's us against it. It's whatever it is. It's us.
Yeah.
It's about us, and it's about what we can do. And I think that there's a part of, especially as type A personalities, as self-starters, entrepreneur types, who I know that a lot of times I'll come back from a workout that seemed really hard, and as I'm driving home, I'll still be asking myself, did I really give it my all? Did I really? Because I'm not. It seems now that I'm not in that situation, that I could have probably gone one or two more times, or I could have done more weight. So did I really give it my all? So it sounds like that's kind of where you were in your career efforts. You're really driven from the inside out, to prove it to yourself and to the world, and to be determined not to fail. That you were competing against yourself.
Well, and to see that having that external plumb line, here's the finish line for this and here's the finish line for that, actually gave, and the accountability that required to earn that was a great practice. That when I said, I want to do more than this, I don't want to be limited to just this, and what am I doing now for free, which is kind of how I see people actually evolving into their own companies or starting their own businesses, is they're already doing something in this strength set that people are getting value from, and they say, I should just start a business. And of course, Michael Gerber's book, The E-Myth, and there's so many that are so great to have that perspective. But as I launched out and started consulting, or started actually doing workshops, training, and coaching, was the kind of the original basis. It was interesting because I was so fresh from those practices, how I could just immediately implement those, but how non-commonsensical they were to most small businesses, because they don't think of tracking their activity every day when they start. They don't think of, setting annual, quarterly, monthly, weekly, daily goals. They don't think like that. But coming right out of that atmosphere, it was really easy to incorporate that and step right into. I actually started out for 6 years. I licensed in my coaching curriculum to other coaches and consultants. And so that really was kind of my passion, to really build the basis for what I do now.
So are you still doing that? Is that still out there?
I actually pulled it off the market. And LeAura, this is actually a great small business tip, is that I wanted it to be perfect. It was my baby. It was my first real product of my own. And I licensed it over 6 years with 3 editions. Everybody who licensed it made more than twice or 3 times their money pretty quickly, with very little. When I look back, I would have given them more support if I had a longer view. But because I kept seeing it in test mode, and then finally after 6 years, I thought, I have to just quit. I either have to go full on or I have to quit. And I just thought, I'm just going to pull it off the market. We are reintroducing it, but not as a licensed product. But it's just crazy how our perfectionist tendency and our personal connection to the baby, whatever the baby is, which is our company, our idea, our product, whatever it is, that our own maturity level in terms of detaching from that. And I don't know if, I haven't even thought about this, whether men or women have an easier time detaching. I would think that men probably do, just because that's their nature, but they're thinking longer term in those. But as women, we're feeding so many areas of our lives by this production.
Well, and I think it's, in fact, my daughter Devani and I, whom she does her own marketing company, Marketing for Traffic, and she does marketing for our brands. We are creating memes, these images with quotes on them this morning. And the one we were creating was about entrepreneurs. And I think the first one was something like, entrepreneurs, business is art. So what you're describing really, it could be the mothering, the nurturing kind of sense, although I do know males who have a similar thing. And part of that is that, it's like the artist that steps back from the painting and still sees something that there could be a brushstroke too. So really the art and bringing in that sense, it's not, and I think that's because the nature of creation, evolution and evolving, creation, nothing in nature gets there and is done.
Yeah.
So it's in our nature not only to keep striving for the best that we can be and the best, that we can achieve, but also to continue to refine, and to evolve. And that includes going into different branches sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, and I look back at it now, because now it's been, 6 years or so since I quit licensing, and I pull out my materials and I go, wow, these are darn good. These are really great.
Yeah.
Wow.
You do,
and I have people saying, are you still trading that topic? It was called Networking for Busy People. It really gave you a real solid personal marketing plan right out of the gate. It was great. But Alex Mendozian has a quote that I heard back then, and I didn't quite own it, although now I do. So I'm pushing product out more quickly that doesn't have to be perfect. Which he said, sloppy success is better than perfect mediocrity.
Yes. And Seth Godin, whom you know of as well, speaks a lot about shipping. You've got to ship the work.
Yeah. So now that I've grown up, I'm 53 now, I've grown up, I can let the baby walk. You don't have to keep holding it until it's perfect.
Yeah. No, and you keep evolving. And I mean, that's the thing that let's see, I think it was on Facebook, you posted something just maybe yesterday. You were talking about all the piles of Post-its and notes and ideas, and you work with entrepreneurs, and there's, most of us are really idea people. And we have more ideas than we could ever do in this lifetime, but many of us try to do too many at one time, because, that's part of the joy and the excitement, bringing things to life. So is that when so when you coach people now, what are the kind of things that they come to you for?
Well, I find that I'm working in 3 basic areas. One is executive coaching. So I'm working with leaders who really are looking for kind of a respected peer. I need feedback. I need accountability. I know where I'm going, but I need that check-in. So I either do it once or twice a month with a couple of people, and some even only 30 minutes. It's just a great touch base. Let's, help me synthesize so I can get right on track. The next tier down of one-on-one work I do is strategy work. So I've been doing strategy work for now actually 12 years. And I've been working in the space of what I call a working business plan approach, which is what are the key elements that you need to actually work your plan. And what I find this last year, and especially right now in this last quarter, has been that the strategy work is about taking everything they've done before, if they've been in business, and saying, I have to simplify. I need to really be able to get focused. So I deliver that in a couple of different packages. People can choose a short or a longer term or a kind of implementation. The other is to do intensives where we actually get together and we just kind of go to the wall, and how you plaster your wall with all your charts and we actually begin to break down. And one of the because of my strength set, and I'll just incorporate that a little bit, because right now I'm talking about strengths and leadership. If you sign up for my newsletter, you'll get insights and downloads, and you'll see the interviews that we're doing on strengths. But my strengths are individualization, which is being able to see the strengths in others. It's activation, which is about getting into action. It is a strategic thinking. It's about maximizing, which is taking good things and making them great. And it's relator, connectedness, and belief. So those are out of the Gallup reports. And as I hear people, I see things in them that they don't always see, that are of value to their market, or that are valued, that would help them accelerate, that would are value. So to be able to have somebody, and we have people around us sometimes that could do that, but we don't trust them, or we're not stepping into that. So, but that's what people are coming to me this year for. And it's been one of the things I think of it as a gift and joy, because then we get to produce a product together that they can leave with, that they go, oh, you kind of clear the clutter and you get into action. And then the other is, what else I'm facilitating some forums where we're actually talking and keeping people on track with their goals and feedback. So that's been the primary this last quarter and end of the next year.
I think that going back to what you said a little earlier about, it's amazing how many business owners do not basically set forth and establish the big picture for their business, for their year. And I think that perhaps a lot of that is because we're doers. And so I look at it from the standpoint of it's the proverbial not
Yeah.
seeing forest for the trees, because we're so busy, hiking the path essentially and forging, like you were saying, forging ahead like this, but we have to come up for air. We have to climb up to the tree and look over the canopy and survey, and then come back down and implement. And again, that's where the coaching and the strategy really comes in, is that, those who aren't doing it for themselves are not able to do it. And even those who are, it's like you said, we so often we don't see what we, our own strengths and potential and energies that we're expressing in the world in the same way others do.
That's right.
Like you're going back to that business owner that you were with all those 10 years and saying what stood out for you, because you wouldn't have been able to identify it at the time. And he gave a name to it. So that's what you're able to do for your clients, that really then helps them, pluck that out and say, okay, this is a tool. This is in my tool chest, and this is how I can use it.
And I can quit worrying if I'm expressing that. I am. Yeah, I don't have to be, I can move it out of my conscious into just showing up. I believe our success code is embedded in our DNA. I think when, we were wired together and everything came together when we were being formed and we came into the earth, that we actually have preferences and strengths and gift mix that actually equip us for a sphere of impact. And, as we're figuring that out in our journey, we find those moments of joy and fulfillment when we are working in that area of our strength set.
In the zone, as they would say.
In the zone. But to talk about the entrepreneurial side, LeAura, I've really been thinking about this last year, because, we call ourselves entrepreneurs, and in our mind we are. But when it comes to looking at the results that many of us end up creating, we actually end up falling in a small business sector, because we really just created a small company where we get to pay ourselves.
We created a job for ourselves. Exactly. Yeah.
And so what I'm keen this year to think about as I'm entering 2015, and now that I've grown up enough that I don't have to keep nurturing the baby, I can actually put things out so people can give me the feedback instead of making it perfect. I'm realizing that the next level of entrepreneur in this spectrum is, how do I leverage, monetize, and develop people in the process, so that I'm not, it's more than Kathie Nelson, it's more than even the core collaborators. It is all of the clients and vendors and contractors. And as we do that, it creates this economic flow, and it creates this prosperity of soul, mind, and spirit, because there's a impartation that happens. But it only happens when there's an economic exchange.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't, I don't want to mean that it's exclusive of that, but the dynamic for an entrepreneur is when there's an economic exchange.
Yes, because we have to plant some of our own seeds in order for some of our own plants to grow.
Yeah.
So, my daughter Devani and I have had a conversation about that recently, where we like you, we love to help people, and we have done a number of free coaching sessions, her with marketing, me with strategic intervention, coaching, counseling, mentoring, that kind of thing, because that's what we do for fun too.
Exactly.
So someone in need, but what we've noticed is that rarely are things implemented when people get it for free.
That's right.
It's painful when you spend a lot of time and energy dedicated to helping someone, and then you find that basically all of what you poured into it wasn't implemented. And yet, meanwhile, they leave, and after that call, you're still thinking about them. You're still worried about them. You're still coming up with solutions. You're still sending emails to them. Try this, and these are the steps, and and then nothing happens, And so I think that's part of what you're referring to, that there has to be that exchange. And I realize that people, they call it skin in the game, and there does have to be a value factor on the recipient's part, where they recognize that this is what I'm committing to. Value that I'm paying for this service.
Right. Well, and your ownership, and LeAura, it's so timely, because even just yesterday I created my own little operating rules again, and I would be happy to their best practices operating rules, and I created them back when I started 12 years ago, because now I'm not accountable to a franchise. I'm not accountable. I'm my own boss, and I thought, well, how am I going to be in business without some rules? And so probably in the first couple of years, somewhere I picked up the best practices or operating rules. And so 1 is to use your calendar. 2 is to limit your free stuff time. So I'm a free stuff marketer. I'm going to give stuff away for free. I'm driven by generosity, like you, like many small business owners and many entrepreneurs, because we're driven by the passion to work in our strengths. But limit your free stuff time. Mine's 20 minutes. I have a little, when I have this in writing and I've written it, I don't even have to have it in front of me, but I will kind of mentally have we're nearing the time of 20 minutes. Let's check in.
Yeah.
And say, would this be of value to you? You know, at this point, what has been of value? Let's talk about how this could be of more value. Because I don't want to waste your time or mine. And so let's see how we can have this make the most impact for you. Mm-hmm. So it might mean that we need to talk about a contract or working together, creating outcomes. The other is to always start meetings with an objective. So when we have a call, when we have a phone call, rather than letting someone else's agenda drive the call, we can incorporate their agenda in by getting clear objectives. Assigning action, which LeAura, this brings up as you're talking to these people and you're busy following up, which I'm guilty of.
Yeah.
When they're off doing whatever, is assigning them an action to be accountable to you, even for free things.
Yeah.
Creates an exchange. And for myself to always invest time in the vision casting, planning, and sitting in the quiet space to really be connected. Hearing from the Lord is how so I can hear. So I'm in pace. I'm in the rhythm, and then to stay grounded in who I am, because if our calendar really is our checkbook of where we've exchanged our time and energy, and when it comes down to the end of the day, it's not that we're managing time. It's just that what we're allowing to take that time, or where we're investing our time. And as entrepreneurs, it's really critical at the end of the year, that we are able to look back and say, this is how I'm going to get a return on that investment, or how I invested it for contribution, or whatever my values are.
Yeah, as well as being able to track regularly, daily, and then weekly, where it is that the holes are that are sapping your time and energy, because that is the one thing. We can make more money, we can't make more time. So that's the one thing that's most valuable. And again, as boomers, we recognize that all the more. We're in our second half of life, and I want to make sure that I don't lose time, don't waste time, don't want to lose the time. So that's great. That in fact, maybe when we post this interview, we can post those tips as part of the interview. That works for you.
Yeah, that would be fun. It's interesting, some of these things that people are doing, and they might be applying in some areas of their life, but they don't think to apply it over here, or they're uncomfortable with, how do I put boundaries around their free stuff marketing now that I've given free discovery sessions, or how do I make that ask? How do I have that conversion conversation? But it's getting together in forums like this where we actually hear, oh, that's the words they use. Let me adopt that. Would it be of value to you if we dug deeper on what would get you an outcome that made you money, made you more time,
Yeah. And I think that, I know for me, my daughter as well, it's like we see what would help people. We see how their efforts in their business could be so much better, or their life, or their emotional relationship, whatever the circumstances they may be addressing. And you really want that for them, so it's like kind of like as a parent with children, you know that if they would just do this, things would be so much better.
Well, and that's, back when I was coaching salespeople, you're wanting it more for them than they want it for themselves.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And so it really does have to be that they want it, that they're ready for it, that they're hungry for it, and that they're really, and that gets back to, again, the exchange, that medium of exchange that sets the wheel of, of things in motion. So that's such a good point that you bring up there.
Well, and with it, while that belief, just to tie that into our strength set, belief is my number 6 or 7th strength, and I am a believer, and I realize that that has multiple connotations, and many of them apply to me. But I'm a believer in people. I'm a believer in each person to reach their potential. I'm a believer, and because I can see it, because I'm also a seer, I see it for them. I believe it for them. I've spent many years investing in people, helping them get there when they couldn't see it for themselves.
Yes.
And so what I've just yesterday was talking to one of my mentors and looking at how to reflect that back to myself, to say, how do I see the value exchange? Because anytime we come out of transition, or if we've had kind of a knock in our life or something that's kind of got us off balance, and we're kind of returning to center, some of those edges where we had boundaries get fuzzy. And so it's a matter of just kind of looking, okay, how do I shore this up? And looking at, I've been like you back in the free stuff marketing without a limit on my time.
Right.
Just kind of saying, let's see what happens here. And measuring the value in what they were able to do or the nuggets I was able to exchange. But, you know, that's not really where my value lies.
Right.
Or yours.
Right.
I mean, so knowing that our value is by showing up and being able to hear, and then meeting the other person where they're able to receive it.
Right. Yeah.
And creating that dynamic of that exchange.
Yes.
Whether it's 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 15 or 45, whatever the rule, the practices you want to have.
Right. Present the vision and then the guidance to that, mm-hmm. not carrying them along the way or pulling them that way. And yeah, definitely.
Well, and the invitation, come on, this is where we're going.
Yeah.
Let me invite you to come with me.
Yeah, that's a good one. So one of the things that when you're working with, you said executives, but you primarily work with small business. Is that correct?
It is. And when I say executive coaching, I'm talking about the primary person.
Right.
So, you know, I either work with the owner of an insurance agency, the owner of a software company, right. The owner of or even just a consultant who's a owner of their own practice.
What is your biggest, and if this isn't something you want to answer in case any of your clients see it, that's okay. But wondering what are some of the biggest obstacles that you see to the small business owners, if there seems to be a consistent, because I know that in sort of relationship coaching, fitness coaching, that kind of, there tend to be some generalities that recur with different clients. So is there commonality? Like you mentioned, goal setting. Is goal setting like one of the number one, Achilles heels of your clients?
I would think that I have one subset of clients that the Achilles heel is making time, because, you know, we actually have to set aside time to actually think and plan.
Yeah.
So to think and plan so that we can envision what the outcome is going to be. So they're always on the hamster wheel. So they're not getting off the fast track to actually get into the fast track lane,
right.
Thinking of, you know, the freeway. We're in the roundabout.
Yeah, as Kiyosaki would say, Robert Kiyosaki, they're in the rat race. They're not on the fast track.
That's right. That's right. I had that author running around. I couldn't remember who exactly said it. So that's one subset. The other is probably the execution implementation. Either they're shifting from that do-it-yourself to I'm trying to build my team of providers or contractors or employees to delegate to. So it's kind of that sorting through from things they've done in the past. So, and that's just a growth. That's just a growth phase that actually everybody runs into. What's another? Communication has been big this last quarter with several of my clients in terms of communicating with the people on their teams. And communication is such a critical thing to always be working on in terms of our own mastery, and also assessing what people hear. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter what we say if people are not hearing what we're saying.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And I think a lot of times the type A people who are the executive leaders or owners, business owners, tend to be more straight into the point, not into fluff or soft pedaling things. And you know, they may not get that the other people that need a little bit of different approach sometimes.
Well, and when the communication begins to break down, and actually one of my clients I talked to last week, he said that's been the most significant difference is made, is that the relationship on my team is so much stronger because I've been able to discuss with you before I bring it to them and get my head in the right place and my language in the right place so that I can hear and they can hear. Because the spirit of offense, it's actually just a teaser for something else we might talk about, but the spirit of offense in miscommunication or in frustrations in building or working together as teams actually is acidic. It'll erode in ways that are invisible to us. And so being able to deal with the offense without taking it personally, or to deal with your role in creating the offense without being all, well, I never, being arrogant about it, being able to be humble and say, you know what, I screwed up. I spoke when I wasn't clear that that we weren't on the same page. Just being able to, because that will really cause a team to break down. It'll cause passive aggressive behavior. It'll cause undermining of efforts in other ways that show up for a long time if
Right.
it's not dealt with.
Yeah, and I think using things like the Gallup, using personality qualifiers or classifiers help us recognize that these are just different ways of being.
Exactly.
Ones, and some of them, work well together, and some of them clash. And then how to, make that dance work. And you talk about communication. That reminds me, I think it was. It may have been the Wall Street Journal. It was a study on how the number one thing that top executive leaders needed coaching on was relationships and communication.
I bet.
It was like by far the number one thing.
Well, that just reminded me that the other commonality that the trend that baffles me at times, but it shouldn't baffle me, is how difficult it is for some people to nail down who it is they serve. Because I need to think about that, because this is a new group of clients. It's not people I've been working with for a while, but just hearing how every time we approach as a new company or as a new business, we have a new offering at times, unless we've been disciplined in our thinking, is that we want to serve the big pie, when really it's this bullseye that really craves what we deliver. But somewhere there's some conflicting belief about, if we get really specific about that niche, we might lose opportunity. There's something there in either an understanding and awareness, or just a fear of the unknown, because it may be that unknown market. But that is a prevalent in almost every market that I'm in.
They're feeling that it's limiting. It would limit them, limit their business, limit their scope. Well, I think, so a solution could be, let's start with a niche and let's grow from there.
Yeah. Well, and those that step in and embrace it and say, I'm not going to worry about anybody else. This is who I'm serving. They've worked on the other elements around, how do we serve better? How do we communicate? How do we lead? How do I set clear goals? How do I keep my team moving? They're zooming. It's those that are kind of all over the place.
It's the market for the long tail. I mean, Seth Godin speaks to that. I forget who wrote the book on that right offhand, which reminds me of another book I wanted to mention when you were talking about leadership and the communication errors. Have you read Multipliers by Liz Wiseman?
Oh, you know what? I have it downloaded on my Kindle. I haven't read it yet.
It's really, really excellent. And so it could be a great, Christmas present or something for your people, but it's a really great, the bottom line is, she talks about there are leaders who are multipliers. They multiply the intelligence and the gifts and the talents of their people and their potential. And then there are minimizers. Or sorry, not minimizers, but diminishers. She calls them diminishers.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they're really good terms, and it makes a lot of sense. So I think you all, and I listened to the audiobook, and it was well read, but I think you enjoy it. What are you reading right now?
What am I reading? I am reading The Freak Factor again, because I'm interviewing David Rendell next week, who is the author of The Freak Factor. He's a management consultant, a stand-up comedian, and a management professor. But so you can dial in. And Kathie Nelson is Kathie Nelson. So it's Kathie Nelson, and you can see that interview there. But so I've been rereading The Freak Factor. I've been reading Icebreakers, which is how to make anyone beg you for a presentation, because I've been doing some sales training. And as I am refreshing and continuing adding tools in that toolkit, because authentic sales conversations are so critical. I'm always reading multiple books.
Yeah.
I like you. So I have a whole library here, and I was just looking at them yesterday thinking, okay, I'm going to pull a different book off the shelf and dig into that.
Well, and I love this about you, because that, you and I are both very similar to, we're idea people. We love to create business. We love to help people read and grow and constantly learn and develop ourselves. And we, in fact, met each other through a program that was about developing expanding our marketing knowledge and that sort of thing. And we've also both commiserated about the fact that sometimes we've invested in too many programs and haven't done enough implementation, right? But so to sort of bring this segment of our sharing together to a close, for many baby boomers, there are those who haven't yet, who may be retiring from corporate and who are looking at what to do their second half of life. And they're even disconnected from any thoughts of what they want to do in some cases. So I think we've kind of covered that from the standpoint of just walking in the direction that you think you might want to go, and you can begin to, things will open up. When you keep on walking in the path, at some point the vista opens up and you see other opportunities and possibilities than you ever imagined. But what is it that, I'm sure you encounter this too. I know I'm saying a lot of things to get to the point. There are so many people who aren't yet fired up about learning and growth, who don't devote as much time and energy and money and investing toward that as you and I and people like us do. And that could be what's missing for some people, because it's that begins, that lights the spark that ignites your journey to better. So what would you say to boomers who, what kind of motivation, what do you see in your business people that what do you say in your coaching programs that kind of help to light people up?
Well, and actually, it's interesting that we didn't pre-plan this, but if you remember, the program we were in where we were looking about publicity and marketing was to promote the book that my mother and I wrote together, which is called I Want What She's Got, The Secrets of Creating an Outrageous Life. And actually, that contains many of the same things I would tell you. Excellent. Which is, so when you are re-engaging in the second stage of life, or when you're re-engaging from any time of inactivity or in transition, is where do you start? What do you do? And I suggest looking for a place you can volunteer. I mean, if you're able to volunteer, to find what gives you juice. So it might be that you're volunteering at SMART, at Start a Smart Reader Today, or you're volunteering at Meals on Wheels, where you're driving and delivering meals to the elderly. It might be that you are volunteering at the food bank, where you're helping sort food and put food in bags and talking to people. It might be that you're, passing out water at the, at the race, and so you kind of see, if your skill set ends in kind of administrative side, who needs support there that you might be able to come alongside, because it's a great networking, but it's also a great stimulation because you're around other ideas and other people. Yeah. The other is if you're able to take your skill set from before and break it down into what really it was that gave you energy, and say, well, how can I do more of that?
Track back to before things were covered over with have tos. Some of the dreams of want tos kind of thing.
Yeah, I've got a associate, a colleague that we'd worked together off and on for years, and we were just talking. She's an excellent strategist in negotiation strategy, but she has a vision, and I can't spill the beans on it, but it is so contrary to a negotiation strategy, but it is so fun and it is so compelling that when it comes out, not only did I see her face light up, and it just came out of an idea that had to do with her cat. And you kind of go, so, and it's going to be highly marketable, as she was telling me about. I'm like, how fun is that? So encouragement is just to let your restart your imagination. Allow yourself to dream, knowing that dreaming is free. Yeah, you don't have to pay anybody for that. You don't have to. And the other
dreaming is free.
Well, and one of the things I might recommend now that is not in the book, because we were just getting introduced to it, is TED Talks. Is to Google TED Talks. Yeah. Watch, look up some different speakers on different topics and see what people are talking about.
That's a great idea. We have linked a few of those, and I know you need to go. So with the interview, we will link and post about your book, co-authored by your mom, Betty Laughlin, right?
It's actually you pronounce her name Logren. So Betty James Logren and Kathie Nelson. I Want What She's Got, The Secrets of Creating an Outrageous Life.
Okay, awesome. We'll post it with the interview. And like I said, I know you got to go, but I want to find out about the cat lady and interview her too at some point.
Great. She'll have a blast with that. Well, thank you so much, LeAura. This has been delightful.
It's been wonderful catching up. Oh, and we didn't even touch on your wine, the wine that you.
Well, I have a few minutes. Let me just
okay.
Rundown.
Yeah.
So I've got a couple of joint ventures I'm doing, a couple global joint ventures, which is really fun. But the most important is my husband and son are launching a commercial winery this year.
Excellent.
So, and for people say, well, where can I buy the wine? Well, what that means is that the harvest, the thing that we produce this year, we bought the grapes in this year, that what we make this year will be available for sale when it goes into the bottle in 2 years. So
Yeah.
launching a commercial winery is a little bit of a long-term, you have to have a long-term view, but it's been fun and delightful. And of course, brings a lot of opportunity to eat really great food and drink great wine.
No kidding. And make some great trips, all of which are tax deductible because it's a business trip, the wineries. And we'll come back and interview that as it gets, interview guys about that as it gets closer. One of the books I want to write is titled Planting for Retirement. So that will fit right in.
Absolutely, absolutely. Love it. Well, I'm always cheering you on, LeAura, when I see what you're doing. And you are the quintessential entrepreneur in terms of looking and evaluating where it is that your time and energy is best invested. And then the fact that you're always encouraging others to do the same. So I just want to thank you for what you bring and how you show up in the world.
Awesome. Thank you, Kathie. You're one of my role models.
Thank you. Well, mutual cheers.
Okay, talk soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.